And remember, we talked about that Rakan ban coming out from the side of G2. I'm very much expecting it here, but also I'm looking at what you can deny away from Misfits, because at the bottom of your screen you can see the ideal comp that fits Misfits' playstyle. You have a roaming playmaker down in the bottom lane in the support role. You have another engage tool from the jungle, and you have mid control in the form of champions like Syndra for PowerOfEvil.
And you get Alphari on a bruiser that can win its lane, be a bit of a split pushing threat, but then join team fights. And G2 Esports, they identify the same thing with the Rakan, with the Gnar. Obviously, there are other picks that also fit the same style here, but we just took one champion for each player. Rakan, Nado being removed away here from Misfits.
Now, bear in mind, Jarvan's still available. It is a big comfort pick for Expect, and I feel like that they're going to put it very high in the early priority list, and I feel like Misfits are expecting them to take that away.
Yeah, Jarvan would be the obvious go-to choice in this situation. Xayah is also a contested pick, but with Rakan already banned, you don't have to first pick her straight away if you are G2 Esports. Of course, Ansama can just grab the Xayah for himself and then get maybe the preferred jungler for Maxlore. The Gragas is available, but we know Trick loves his Sejuani, and he's happy taking that trade.
Very good point right now, and we're also taking a look at two of these mid laners, because something that we saw a lot of yesterday was actually a delay in the prioritization of those mid lane champions. And when you compare across the two, these two have very similar champion pools, but also they have so much success on things like the Cassiopeia, the Syndra, these big power picks that we've seen resurging recently in the middle lane.
And you get your 30 KDA Orianna for PowerOfEvil here in the first game. On PerkZ' side, he can just grab this Corki or the Syndra for himself. Crowd do not like the Cho'Gath after it's been losing so many games.
Well, it has, but Expect has done relatively well. It's 3-0 in playoffs on that champion. You mentioned the 30 KDA in playoffs for Orianna. PowerOfEvil, he's 10 wins, 2 losses on the split. His most played champion by a massive margin.
So with the Gnar banned away, G2 feel confident picking the Cho'Gath for top lane. I'm still looking at mid lane here if PerkZ wants to play something like Corki, or if he takes the Syndra. There's still enough mid lane champions open that he can actually wait, see 2 of them banned away, and still find something good to play. And that's why they're waiting with the mid lane.
We do know that he has also played Talia during the regular season, and while we are playing on patch 7.16, and she has had a few nerfs, she is still a very strong mid laner, being able to roam around the map and have impact on these other side lanes, but it does mean a less of investment towards trying to snowball PerkZ, which is a strategy we've seen a lot of from G2 during playoffs.
So right now we have Misfits in a situation where they have already shown their mid laner and can ban away from PerkZ. They're also now showing a flex pick, technically, while we do expect it to be Trundle top versus Cho'Gath. You always have the option of putting him down support, making it a little bit harder for G2 to pinch.
Well, it's phase 2, so where do they pinch then, not knowing the Trundle?
Well, the thing is, for G2, you would expect them to pinch the jungle pool. But remember what we said about Maxlore. This guy, he doesn't have a champ pool, he has a champ sea, like a champ ocean. This guy has so many champions at his disposal, and he is fine saving his jungle pick till later on to guarantee that his carries have their comfort pick.
Yeah, again, as you said earlier, Vedius, we've seen the Rengar, we've seen the Kayn already from Maxlore, often picked later on in the draft. Not exactly the champions you just pick in the first rotation.
But there's a lot of junglers still open. The Zac, the Sejuani, for example, not banned yet. 3 seconds left for G2 in their first phase 2 ban, and it will be the Morgana supports being hit.
Definitely expecting the Trundle to be top lane against the Cho'Gath. Morgana taken away, so Mithy obviously likes to play a lot of different tanks in the bottom lane. Alistar being a big one for him. Braum has been used. Thresh is always a champion we know Mithy can play, but it's very up and down on if he actually wants to play it or not. But with the Morgana ban, it does set up for it. And Misfits, they read the same situation and ban away Thresh.
All right, so we're going to see another support then banned out here for G2 Deficio, or where do they go then? And let's look towards the phase 2 picks. What does Misfits leave for their final pick as well? It's a big question mark.
Definitely so far, they can take their jungler and this last pick for the support. There's a lot of valuable last pick supports in the current meta, and then you still keep the Trundle flex theoretically, you know, up for grabs here.
And it looks like G2, they've thrown that final jungle ban towards Misfits. Max Ansar just pleasing the crowd a little bit there with the Pantheon. But the other big champion we have to bear in mind the other big champion we have to bear in mind is the LeBlanc, often picked into the Orianna. A bit of a risky pick for the side of PerkZ, but it was something that was very often taken away in yesterday's third place match.
I was about to mention Sejuani here. I think of the remaining tanks, it is the best. And again, it saves last pick for support. We get Mithy's Alistar, now we need the mid lane pick. Corki works fine against Orianna, LeBlanc works fine against Orianna, Lucian works fine against Orianna. There's a lot of good choices for PerkZ. He grabs his LeBlanc in, they're going to try and play around mid lane with the Jarvan as well.
Well, let's see what PerkZ can do in this champion. One game in playoffs, he went 8-1-4. Support is all that's left for Misfits, or some surprise for Alphari in the top lane. Misfits 8 seconds. Let's see what they lock in here for the first game of the championship final.
Blitzcrank is always one we see from IgNar, but not in this case against an Alistar. And it seems to be Trundle support and the Maokai in the top lane. It's very much focused on scaling from Misfits, where on the side of G2, especially with the Jarvan LeBlanc combo, that's a lot of pressure around the mid lane.
You got to remember the Alistar too. We saw so many roams from Che yesterday, getting very early mobility boots and just putting so much pressure down onto the opposition mid. It just allows your mid laner to either move around the map or get that early tower to give you the freedom across the rest of the game.
Misfits, they're going to see if they can actually win this bottom lane. Trundle Pillar is fantastic against Sivir. Your spell shield does not do anything against it, and it can actually set up the Xayah to try and win some trades early on in the laning phase, but it is a tough lane to actually get kills in, so completely snowballing it is probably not as easy as looking at a LeBlanc Jarvan combo in the mid lane against an Orianna.
And I also think that Hansama getting his hands on the Xayah, a big comfort pick for him. There have been a few question marks about how deep is his champion pool, but when he's always available to get these comforts where he can peel for himself, you can truly see why he is so mechanically gifted, and he can really debut that here in front of the French crowd.
Oh, debuting in front of the Parisian crowd, Hansama. Let's see whether or not he can carry. It is game 1 in the best of 5. The summer split title is on the line. And as you can hear the crowd cheering, you guys know where to vote. You know how to vote. And I hope you're putting your hands together just like the fans. It's G2 taking on Misfits. Misfits fans are plenty as we load up for game number 1, gentlemen. Got the makings of some crazy late game team fights. 2 men on your screen, PerkZ and PowerOfEvil. Celebrating being here in Paris with the French Summoners Rift announcer. I want to see how Alphari performs on this Maokai. We know a lot of the other players we've spoken about. It's only the second time this split that Alphari's played this champion, and I want to see whether or not he can be the reliable frontline his team needs.
Yeah, their pure tanks was never really what Alphari wanted to play. He was always much more focused on, again, champions where he could actually have a bit of pressure in the side lane. We've seen Jace, Kennen, Renekton, Gnar, Jarvan, all these kind of champions here that can really win and get ahead. Maokai is much more focused on playing with the team.
But I want to throw your mind back to spring, where Alphari was forced to play a lot of these big tanks up in the top lane, back when Maokai was considered the S-tier top. That is when Alphari was getting very impressive stats. That's where he was holding his own on the debut here in Europe, and he was really starting to make a name for himself. And I'm excited to see if he can come back to that kind of a form, because his playoff performance has been spectacular.
Can't, of course, forget the great stats on Renekton that he used to kill all the tanks with, together with Kakao, making it even better for him. This we saw yesterday, hiding in this little tri-brush when someone is leasing for the jungler.
All right, bit of damage coming down onto Zven. He's already chunked out. No real response, and that's going to give Misfits an early advantage in the 2v2. Hold this thought, because Trick is going for an early gank middle. PowerOfEvil, sidestep, the flag and drag gets locked down by the chains, but that's double summoners blown already.
So already early shenanigans coming out from both sides. Hansama and IgNar trying to get that early lead down in the 2 versus 2. And Trick, he wants to continue this pressure in the enemy jungle, getting some deep vision and identifying now that Maxlore started topside, they'll be able to track his early Panther.
Yeah, these were the 2 lanes we talked about. Bot lane, Misfits trying to get ahead against Zven and Mithy, and then mid lane. When you play LeBlanc, you want to camp that lane. LeBlanc is some of the best setup for a jungler with a distortion and a chains. Bot lane, we get some trade in favor of Misfits.
Yeah, a lot of damage going back and forth, but I want to talk about that early gank from Trick, because both Trick and Maxlore really stepped up in the playoffs in comparison to the regular season. A lot of them putting focus and time around that mid lane, but in slightly different styles. It actually, in my opinion, was Maxlore ganking more. And Trick already showing on the Jarvan, he can do the same when needed.
You're very much right, QuickShot. The differences between them are that I had a chat with Trick before we came into this final, and he said one of the things that I really focus on is making sure that my mid lane is ahead, because if we have control over the mid, we have control over the map. And PerkZ is the kind of player he knows he can trust, whereas Maxlore, he's the kind of player that prefers to just play around his comp. If he sees a lane that he knows he can get ahead, he will play towards that. But if he can, PowerOfEvil is the guy he wants to try and snowball.
Exactly. During the playoffs, it's been mainly play around PowerOfEvil, get PowerOfEvil ahead, and do exactly the same thing G2 were trying to do. Control the mid lane, and then you can start going to side lanes after. It is much easier to play this game through mid.
But the big concern I have right now for Misfits is the fact that PowerOfEvil has already lost both of his summoners. LeBlanc is a massive threat once she hits the level 4 mark, especially because she's going to have all of her abilities. Her mobility is insane. And setting up for ganks with the Jarvan, especially with a roaming Alistar, is going to be a big thing that PowerOfEvil is going to have to be aware of.
I'll keep my eyes on Mithy and when he's allowed to leave lane. Hansama and IgNar may have something to say about that. If they can keep him pressured under tower, you can see them continually pushing Zven and Mithy back.
I mean, this is why Misfits took the Trundle, which technically is a good pick against Cho'Gath, and moved it down to support to try and keep Alistar in the lane. Don't let Mithy roam. And generally, like Misfits, they know they do not have the great gank setup in mid, so they have to accept that, and PowerOfEvil will need to play a bit more passive in the early game.
Well, we know that PowerOfEvil can do well in the late game. As I mentioned, his win-loss in this Orianna in Summer, 10 wins, 2 losses. It's pretty spectacular. PerkZ is going to dash forward. Get a little bit of a trade. I actually think he lost some HP there on that one.
This might even be a game where we see a PowerOfEvil special, where he goes towards the Nash's Tooth. Having chatted to him, he says that he likes to do it when he's against a lot of tanks because he prefers the consistent DPS. And with 3 big tanks sitting on his face, we'll have to see if he goes towards that personal specialty of his.
I like seeing PowerOfEvil winning on some of those trades. PerkZ trying to trade pretty heavily and ended up losing. Small CS advantage for him is Trick. Going to spot out Maxlore, tries to steal a couple of these baby raptors. I don't think he's got any of them, actually. Maxlore was able to clear that one out. And taking a look at the rest of the lanes here, PerkZ with an early teleport. We know it's kind of a farm lane. Cho'Gath into Maokai is not going to be the most exciting. So we'll see how well they impact once the teleports come in. Hansama and Zven, they're trading a good stun down onto IgNar as Mithy continues to back away.
I notice how every time Misfits bottom lane wants to try and force a trade, Mithy's always prioritizing Hansama because that's where the primary damage is coming from. If he can just keep him busy, then there's no real follow-up. And IgNar, he's left to try and 1v1 Zven. And sure, he'll force the Zven back, but it means that they will still be able to hold their own lane and survive it for as long as possible.
The big trade there in the mid lane as PerkZ is sitting all the way forward. He's got himself that Hextech Revolver, using that TP to maintain presence and control in this lane. And Misfits on 6 minutes, starting to struggle. A little bit of support here in mid. Maxlore being called the get out of jail free button for PowerOfEvil.
Exactly, no teleport on the Orianna means that PerkZ can just keep the pressure going, and while Maxlore's here to help him. Oh wait, let's see.
A lot of damage. PerkZ goes low, down to 50, but Trick was nearby.
All right, PerkZ, you're not going to do that one again. Bot lane as well.
Headbutt pulverize comes down, Exhaust is already baited. Hansama is able to back away. Only IgNar using the summoner spell, and there's an army of minions for G2 to rely on.
Good use of the level advantage as well there from G2's bottom lane, both hitting level 5. Having that extra point in the ability is a lot of extra damage early levels. Now we move back to the mid lane where PerkZ, that was a bit of a risk. Very, very close one there.
A little bit.
But he does get away with his life, as you rightly said. QuickShot Trick was hanging around, and now this will give freedom for PowerOfEvil to go back to base and buy a couple lineups.
Yeah, and that trade was actually really important for PowerOfEvil because he was sharing a lot of experience with Maxlore right there. If PerkZ had still been healthy, he could have stayed in lane and at least push one more wave and actually try and get a bit of an XP lead. But because PerkZ was so low, he also had to recall, so they ended up actually recalling at the same time. They returned to lane now as well, sitting on roughly the same experience.
All right, so we're 7.5 minutes in. G2 feeling a little more proactive here. Zven and Mithy finding some good combos in the duo lane. PerkZ in PowerOfEvil's face the entire time.
Yeah, but Maokai and Cho'Gath
hey, dude,
are farming.
This is tank v tank. I've seen this before, and it gets exciting in about 15 minutes.
It's actually funny because Maokai in Europe is not very cool. It's not considered very strong. One of the reasons is the fact that he's doing so little early on, and people are trying to actually take over the lane a little bit more, especially in the top lane. But Maokai in other regions are still considered a really strong top laner.
He is, especially over in North America. In yesterday's third-place match, he was almost always banned every single time because of the amount of utility that he can provide. And in Europe, as you already said, a little bit slow to be picked up, but Misfits, we talked a lot about how coming into these sort of games, they are very prepared, and I'm excited to see how well they can make it work later on.
And now then, with the Sejuani, with the Trundle, with the Maokai, these big tanks with a lot of CC, it means that PerkZ is in this situation where he needs to actually do really well in the early to mid game to really have an impact. Late game, LeBlanc can struggle to kill these big tanks.
All right, Maxlore and PowerOfEvil, they find PerkZ. He's able to distort away to safety and manages to back away. So no first blood yet. And let's see whether or not Misfits can continue to defend, because we've talked about the scaling on their side. We know PowerOfEvil wants to buy some time. We've got these front lines on both sides. But with the Jarvan, LeBlanc, Sivir, it feels like G2 may be able to pull the trigger a little earlier.
But there was no return gank after Orianna lost
Exactly
the flash.
right.
Maxlore been around the mid lane, not to gank and kill, but more to protect PowerOfEvil, wait for the summoner spells to be back. Only problem is that a Jarvan and a LeBlanc can still kill you even though you have flash.
All right, let's see if anyone dies down bottom. Mithy's got a little bit of that cowbell running, although I think not by choice. Skin throws up by itself every now and again. And IgNar and Hunt Summer, they're still sitting on even CS, but this Alistar from Mithy, huge comfort pick, seems to keep finding those headbutt pulverized combos.
Now we see Trick finally making his way up topside. Expect they just used the knock-up.
All right, let's see. Alphari still got flash available.
Oh.
Great Bramble smash. Expect is actually locked outside of the Cataclysm. Some anti-synergy.
Dodges that one.
Alphari also dodges another. Doesn't even use flash.
That is the most outplay you're ever going to see on a Maokai. Alphari, what a great way to start this laning phase and avoiding that early first blood.
Alphari goes alpha in the top lane, sending a message to Expect and Trick. And if that is the level Alphari can play, that is how Misfits can unlock some of these plays and team fights.
It's good to see here in his very first final, in the very first game he's playing as well. Zero nerfs. He's just playing that so cool, not flashing away or anything.
And it's perfect that you mentioned that too, Deficio, because I went to speak to Alphari. I said, how are you feeling? How's it going? And he said, I'm actually super nervous, but I know the moment I get into stage, it'll all disappear. Full focus, and we see that right here.
Around mid lane, Maxlore again protecting PowerOfEvil, but also sneaking into the brush here. Trick is around, but he's not actually ganking mid just yet.
Trick still somewhat reading Maxlore. Trick had a few good early ganks during his playoff performance against H2K. Trick seemed to download Yankos. And let's see if he can do the same. PerkZ continues to move forward, but junglers are in place. Here comes Maxlore. Glacial Prison's down. Misfits not going to find first blood. Knock up from Trick, and Maxlore and PowerOfEvil backing away. Not exactly on the same page.
Unfortunately for PowerOfEvil, he was just a little too far away. The ball could not get the follow-up. And it did mean that PerkZ, he uses his flash, and the pressure is now being put onto PerkZ.
Yeah, PowerOfEvil not getting into range with that shockwave. You see Trick, now he's going to get chunked down. Here comes Maxlore. Flag and drag comes out to safety. But let's look a little deeper at Maxlore and PowerOfEvil. The two guys who, throughout the course of the playoffs, have been some of the big standout players. Maxlore enabling PowerOfEvil, and then PowerOfEvil taking over the game.
We talked a little bit about it earlier, where the main strategy for Misfits has been very much about trying to snowball this middle lane, set up PowerOfEvil for success. And you can just see from their statistics, they've been doing a mighty job of it.
Yeah, the 44% jungle proximity from Maxlore means that he's the most active jungler when it comes to being near his teammates, you know, effectively roaming together, ganking for them. He's so active, and that's where we did see a difference between G2 and Misfits when we looked at the two teams. You said it earlier, Trevor, already. Trick was more there. Counter jungle focused and like very focused on his farm, and then just protect his mid lane as often as possible, where Maxlore was the guy who was playing very aggressive. In this game though, we did get the early gank from Trick. No follow-up though ever since. It's actually been Maxlore trying to force some plays.
And it's interesting to see that it's IgNar that's getting those early roams, rushing the mobility moves, working with Maxlore to get this deep vision down. Misfits always trying to be ahead of the curve.
Well, Mithy and IgNar are going to go trading toe for toe. Maxlore's in the area. A little bit of a lane swap from both squads. Misfits on the tower top earlier than G2. Small tempo advantage, and if you look at the minimap, deep vision inside that top left quadrant of the jungle from Misfits, allowing them a little more information. Sapling toss goes out. Expect an Alphari trading in the most exciting tank trade we've seen yet.
I actually like that Trick went for the gank on the Maokai earlier, because I think after level 6 with Cho'Gath, you can actually burst down people very easily in these 2v1 ganks, but they just couldn't lock him down in time, and might see Trick continue doing it, but PowerOfEvil right now is getting control in mid.
He's playing this so perfectly, and he wouldn't have been able to do this if it weren't for the early pressure that Maxlore was just constantly exerting mid. PerkZ could never assert dominance in that lane, and this is something that he built a bit of a reputation for, but the duo has done a good job of shutting it down.
Yeah, and I think PerkZ losing a lot of those trades as well. Jumping into the face of PowerOfEvil. Talking about trading, we once again see Mithy zoning out Summer, catching him with that knock-up and pushing him away. It's not equating into a CS lead, but there might be a dive on the cards. Alistar still got his ultimate available and Cataclysm from Trick.
Maxlore is reading a situation. We have to remember PerkZ is sitting with teleport. He can always join a side lane. I think G2 will realize that because Sejuani is already top, going for the dive is a little bit too risky, and it's 0-0 in terms of the kills, but there's been a lot of trades, a lot of small fights started. No one been able to kill each other though, so we're seeing very even lanes across the entire map.
Well, both of these teams have had phenomenal playoff runs, and their average gold differences at 15 minutes are quite far apart. G2 actually was behind 100 gold, despite going 6-2. Misfits, on the other hand, at 15 has had an aggregate gold lead of 1,000 gold. So this is one of the more competitive or close games that we've seen. I think you have to give some credit to Trick for putting some pressure both top and middle and keeping PowerOfEvil and IgNar just a little bit defensive.
I feel like that Trick has been very aware of what Maxlore has been trying to do, and while he hasn't been able to properly snowball PerkZ, it's also been difficult for Misfits to get any kind of snowball of their own. And one of the big things that we've been discussing before coming into this series was, what can Misfits do when they don't have that massive early game advantage? Because G2, they've never relied on getting an early game lead. They are a slow, methodical team. They are fine playing a passive early game if it means that they can set themselves up for success coming into the mid and late game.
And I think it's important to kind of talk about what is this, like, you know, methodical style really means. And it means that G2 eSports, they're a team that they don't like to gamble. They don't like to do big coin flip plays that are 50-50. That could go wrong, that could work for them. They like instead to get full control of one side of the map with the vision, and then say, okay, now we actually have a play here that is like an 80% in our favor, and there's a very low chance it will go wrong. And then they try and execute it. And it does mean your games are quote-unquote sometimes a little bit slower, but it's all about the setup for G2. And once they get the setup, they will execute.
Yeah, talking about setup, a bunch of control wards as well as that Rift Herald. For G2, if you look at their inventory, Gunblade being closer to completed for PerkZ, and first big item spike slowly creeping in across the board. Expect has gone for that defensive start on his Cho'Gath, and it's still a very even game as the map is starting to open up.
But we did see a small win here for G2 in getting the Rift Herald. Basically what happened was Misfits dual lane in the top were recalling, and they timed it with the blue buff spawning and being handed over to PowerOfEvil. So he was on the other side of the map, and IgNar was back at base.
Oh, look at that again. PerkZ takes a gigantic chunk to the face, flashes away from the shockwave. PowerOfEvil on his most comfortable pick, having a great time in mid lane. And remember, he was ganked at, what, a minute and a half and lost both summoners. Well, 2.5 rather. Either way, PowerOfEvil setting himself up extremely well to go into this mid game in a comfortable, powerful position.
For the time being, things are mainly just a slow back and forth. We know that G2, they do have that Rift Herald available to them, and they can use that to start breaking open the map, but it's a matter of where do they try and use it to push open the map. G2, Trick is moving to the top side. You do have Sivir, who's now completed the Essence Revert, which means you have quite a lot of push at your disposal, and this might be the first tower that they take down.
Once again, though, on the minimap, you can see Maxlore hovering around the top side, trying to protect this dual lane here whenever they get pushed in. One thing Trick could do is go to the bottom lane and play around Cho'Gath, see if they can kill Maokai and then place down the Rift Herald, but he's staying on the top side, looking for a gank.
All right, Summer's made it back to the tower. IgNar's the target. Here's Maxlore. Tricks come in. Cataclysm comes down. IgNar's able to flash away. Nobody dead yet. PowerOfEvil's the first to move, but teleport's available if PerkZ wants to join. Mithy, Trick, Zven running for their lives. Teleport needs to start getting channeled. Who's going to come in first? Not yet. Expect starts the channel. Exhaust else now being thrown down. First blood available. Knock up onto Maxlore. Nobody's dead yet. Shockwave. Misfits get first blood in Paris. Now PerkZ replies into Maxlore. It's a 1-for-1. Misfits are surrounded. PerkZ running for his life though. Now the knock-up from the Rupture onto Alphari. It's Mithy for Maxlore.
Oh, he wants him.
PerkZ looks for the Shatter Orb. IgNar's going to get a chomp down. Not enough cooldowns yet for PerkZ. And at the end of the day, 1-for-1 and Tower on the cards for G2.
G2 are the ones that have the pressure advantage though, because they're utilizing this Rift Herald. But what a close fight between these two teams. Things look so close, especially with the double teleport on the side of G2. I thought they were going to get the collapse down, but PowerOfEvil arrived first. He gets the big shockwave, he secures that first kill, and it is now Power and PerkZ that are sitting on that gold.
And that fight just fits the game so well. Like super close, 5 versus 5, where only 2 members actually die. It is Trick sitting in that top lane, but as we said before, Maxlore was around to protect this 2v2 lane, and while it's just a skirmish, we gotta remember, double TP on the side of G2 Esports.
And that ward right there that was just placed by Mithy, that is going to be the key thing that allows G2 to come back into this fight, because 3 members, very delayed TP from Expect. Misfits, they realize they're winning the fight, but the moment this TP comes through, Mithy feels confident to go for the re-engage, and then here comes the shockwave.
Exactly. Quick kill for PowerOfEvil. Maxlore is too low, though, in the back line, and PerkZ, with the mobility of LeBlanc, can get the kill and also get out right after. Look here at the screen, though. A push back from Misfits. First tower goal for them. Trick and G2 trying to get bot lane tower and the Drake.
All right, so net positive, at least with the Dragon, but gold in favor of Misfits. It's not enough of a lead to truly speak of. That's a dive onto PerkZ, and he's going down. Misfits make that look easy with sheer diving pleasure. The tower is the focus as G2 look for a re-engage. Pulverize and headbutts, gonna knock Alphari under the tower. Nature's Grasp keeps Misfits fighting. Alphari's able to flash away to safety, but the tower is helping out G2. Now Hunt Summer and Misfits, the rest of them looking at the mid tower. 1-for-1 trading kills, but Misfits get the objective.
They do get the mid tower, they do get the kill, but G2 trade it back, and they will get a tier 2 in the bottom lane. This is a classic G2 move where they always find ways of turning things back in their favor. I love the proactivity from Misfits, but G2 are keeping this game so close.
I like the fact that Misfits, though, they punish PerkZ in the mid lane. Like, if there's one mid lane who wants to stay, try and kill that last wave, or maybe get another trade. When it's too risky, it is PerkZ. Like, he saw Misfits leave the top lane. There's only one lane they can walk to, that is the mid lane. Get out of there, PerkZ. He stayed, he died for it.
Oh, and that meant Misfits also got that mid tower. Gentlemen, 2 towers apiece, 2 kills apiece. Only a Dragon in the coffers of G2 Esports plays into their favor. And at this stage, with both teams looking so even, so equal, when do we start talking about scaling in the late game and who's going to be happier?
We said that in Jam Select. We're already talking about it. The fact that PerkZ is not really snowballing in this game is a slight worry for G2, because I will definitely take a late game Orianna above this LeBlanc
Especially a PowerOfEvil Orianna too.
That's another bonus, because you got to keep in mind, Sejuani, Maokai, like these champions, they don't care about LeBlanc's little poke damage. They can even CC her. You know what works really well against a mobile champion?
Tell me.
A point-and-click snare. Who brings that? Oh, Maokai brings that. So it will actually be very difficult for PerkZ to carry late game fights, where PowerOfEvil, he can definitely do it.
And one of the big things that PerkZ is slowly going to come to realize as this game progresses, every time Misfits group up and PerkZ tries to go in, he's going to get a pillar in his face. So that means he's either going to be forced to use his dash just to get away, or he's going to dash into a place where he's now stuck literally between a rock and a hard place. And Misfits are going to try and take advantage of that as often as they can.
Luckily for G2, they do have the Sivir win condition. It almost worked yesterday for Reckless. It's worked earlier in the playoffs as well. Zven in late game fights will be the main carry for G2. He will be the person to follow on their side, where on Misfits there are more carries you can rely on.
All right, talking about Zven, he just finished his static shift to go with the Essence Reaver. Righteous Glory was picked up by Expect. Essence Reaver as well as that static shift for Hunt Summer. I saw Misfits flirting around Baron. You can see all the vision that's set up as well. Let's see if or when they decide to use that objective to pull G2 towards them.
Well, the team with Cho'Gath tends to be the one forcing Baron. Nice flash from PowerOfEvil.
All right, gets out to safety. G2 need to buy some time. Chains come down into Maxlore. He's chunked. Look at the gigantic shield, though. Gets knocked up by the Rupture. Misfits feel they've got to re-engage on the cards. Nature's Grasp can get thrown down by Alphari. The tension continues to build as nobody's gone down yet.
And I'm just tracking what ultimates were used because it's 3 on the side of G2 for the 2 on the side of Misfits. But the biggest thing here is that Maxlore's engage is unavailable. He cannot use that ulti to start the fight. But the bigger thing is that Expect does have the teleport over his counterparts.
Misfits right now, they know they have to stay around Baron due to that lack of TP you just highlighted. They can't just leave the area because then G2 will push out side lanes and start Baron after.
Expect's no flash.
All right, let's see if Expect gets knocked down. He's already used the feast. The shockwave catches 2. We're following Zven and the AoE as Mithy's moving forward. PowerOfEvil's down. G2 take the kill lead. Alphari and Maxlore running for their lives. Trick and G2 take down Alphari. And Misfits get caught out.
Yeah, that's the kind of fight G2 needs while they can still rely on PerkZ also dealing some serious damage. Good team fight from them. Zven left untouched in the back line, dishing out the DPS.
G2 continue the siege down the mid lane, but they're not going to go further.
It was so important as well to burn that flash from PowerOfEvil early on. Remember how that whole fight started off? Trick diving on top of PowerOfEvil. He tried to force him out of the fight, and he does. And here, keep your eyes on Power once more, because Misfits, they think, oh, in gone to Expect. But look, Handsummer's not even in the fight. Mithy gets a great engage onto PowerOfEvil, and he's now the one stuck in the middle of all these damage dealers. Handsummer can only hit onto Mithy, and this gives the freedom for Zven and PerkZ to just mash away at whoever's in front of them.
Yeah, the entire setup to this fight was actually a bunch of just small wins for G2. The fact that Alphari had to TP into a team fight where the team did not get a kill was obviously bad for him. Then the double TP and the forced flash from PowerOfEvil, another win for G2, and just set them up for success in that following team fight, and they used it really well.
The game seems to reset ever so slightly. Next Dragon is an Infernal Drake. Obviously Baron is on the cards, has been available for several minutes. And with all the tanks and some of the damage, it is going to naturally become more of a focus. I was looking at all the control wards, a number of them picked up and traded. Now we need to look at who's going to get vision control and how that is utilized. Misfits playing the Death Bush game. We'll see whether or not G2 fall prey.
Remember, if Alphari sits in the bottom lane against Expect, then G2 will control the map. They have TP. Alphari needs to leave very early, already hovering around mid in case a Baron rush gets started. And when you have a Cho'Gath, then you can always rush down Baron.
You're quite right, Deficio. We saw how well teams utilized that yesterday to force this Gnar split pusher to join the rest of the team to force the fight. But it works even better when your opposition has no teleport, and because of how defensively Misfits are being forced to play, this is giving G2 further control over these neutral objectives.
If Misfits can actually push out the bottom lane, then Alphari can walk to the mid lane, join his team, and Misfits can play around Baron themselves and try and force a team fight where they can maybe get Expect's TP.
But the one big thing that we haven't even highlighted yet is the fact that this tier 2 in the bottom lane is going to make that super obnoxious for Alphari, because even if he pushes it out, that wave is never really going to go past the river. It will always auto-push back, and Misfits, they need to find a way to deal with that.
Yeah, it just means that he has less time to make this play where he goes mid, pushes out the mid lane, because what happens every time is the top laner who leaves the side lane first allows his team to control the mid lane, because there are already 5 members there. The other top laner needs to TP in first. But then this guy will have to go back to his side lane again when the wave is being pushed back towards him, otherwise he loses too much farm. Luckily
for Misfits, Alphari's teleport is becoming available very, very soon. So that window of opportunity to make those plays is slowly closing. And G2 eSports, they maintain the lead. It's around 2,500 gold. That Infernal Drake at this stage, with all the itemization spikes, going to play into their favor really well. And you've got CS leads in top and middle for both of G2's solo laners. This is a good spot for a team that does have maybe slightly lower scaling across the board, and let's see if they can use it. Unbreakable Will is used here by Mithy. There's support, the teleport coming down from Expect. The fight is split up on both sides. IgNar is trying to keep everyone busy. Expect was zoned out, and it's PerkZ that takes down IgNar off screen. Misfits caught a little bit out of position.
And G2 with a good punish. Mithy really well played there on the Alistar. Looked like he was the one caught out, but then he turns it around onto IgNar. He gets his flash down. G2, they have the push on mid. They have full vision around the Baron, and now Misfits are the ones being forced back.
We talked a lot about the scaling on both sides. I actually think now, looking even more at G2's comp, the fact that Misfits have nothing that can really dive the backline and kill an AD carry makes this Sivir pick the MVP of the late game for G2. And that should mean they can always win teamfights no matter how late we are in the game.
All right, Alphari used that point-and-click CC. It may cost him his life. Spell Shield means the Nature's Grasp does nothing, and the Shockwave will get interrupted and not catch anyone from G2. That's a kill onto Alphari. The rest of Misfits make their way in. Glacial Prison comes down, but G2 are able to escape. They're low on HP, and Misfits are in a 4v5 in the best-case scenario. PerkZ continues to chunk down IgNar as G2 start to back away. The Rupture won't catch anyone on the retreat, and G2 maintain control of the Rift.
And Misfits, they're starting to look a little scattered right now. They tried to move into their enemy jungle to just, or their own jungle rather, to get some vision control so they can set up for a potential steal. But G2 immediately in there, making sure that they can fight around this vision. They do not want to relieve any of the pressure that is being exerted down onto Misfits, and that is where everything goes in the favor of G2.
See the start again. There's a lot of damage onto Mithy at first, but TP from Cho'Gath coming in, and of course IgNar, once he gets knocked over that wall, there's no way out. The Cho'Gath is too tanky in G2's front line, and he ends up stepping away.
They were too afraid to commit as well, and this was the fight for vision that we were talking about. Notice how Mithy and PerkZ move in together. They're just trying to make sure that they have full control over this topside jungle. It makes setting up for the Baron all the more easier. And then Alphari, he goes on a bit of a solo mission here. Apart from the rest of his team, he thinks that he has PowerOfEvil to back him up. He thinks he's got Maxlore there too, but then the mobility from PerkZ, the zoning from Zven, and expect to prevent the follow-up. And now it's Alphari that ends up getting caught out.
Not a whole lot he can do once you already got chain CC'd.
Literally.
That was the joke, Young Day. So thank you.
Thought I'd explain it for
it's
anyone.
Cool. I liked it. I like that.
Well, G2 still maintain control as we get to 30 minutes in game. It's only 3,500 gold. But more importantly than that, they are dictating the moves. They are kind of making Misfits dance to their beat.
Ooh,
and the
look at
teleport
PerkZ.
in behind Misfits will be the next move. PerkZ is going to finish it. Cataclysm comes down from Trick as Misfits are locked inside. PerkZ is exhausted, so the damage
Big
is
one.
there. That's a great shockwave. Looking at the follow-up. PerkZ goes gold in the middle of the fight. Forced to flash away to safety. Nobody's dead yet. The Feast does not take down Alphari, and the redemption buys time. Nobody dies.
But PerkZ played that fight so beautifully, getting that TP in from behind, getting straight onto the backline made it so difficult for Misfits to really utilize their damage dealers. We talked about how hard it is to use a LeBlanc, and PerkZ is really stepping up.
All right, what about the summoner spells? Looking down Alphari and the rest of Misfits squad, everything but Smite was used. Can say the same for G2 except for Zven. One of the key damage dealers,
Yes.
that could be crucial.
And that's the thing. Getting to this Sivir is so hard for Misfits because normally you didn't say they can use a shockwave. You know, Maokai goes in, ball is on him, you can then shockwave the AD carry, but Spell Shield is the hard counter to that. So Zven should be able to stay safe in every single fight.
Unless I'm mistaken, we saw somebody yesterday. Summerspot MVP Spell Shield every single shockwave. Let's see if Zven can do one better in a higher stakes match. Baron has been started. Misfits forced to respond. Remember Alphari, no teleport available.
Just used it. He just used it because he saw the start from G2, and G2, they've got what they wanted now. Because with that unavailable, they're in the same position that they were in earlier. G2 utilizing this double TP so effectively, and just look at the side lanes, Deficio.
There's some big waves coming in. One will be killed in the top lane by Hansama. The bot lane one, that is the bigger problem. You can't send anyone to that lane due to no teleport from Alphari, so they'll have to just let the entire wave die.
That hurts.
So much CS going right into the tower.
Oh man, Misfits gonna lose out on the XP, gonna lose out on the gold, but they are not losing out on the Baron. Actually gonna enlist Baron to help poke PerkZ as he escapes. And in terms of vision, Misfits, they're not completely blind, but they are battling with very limited resources, Deficio.
We saw that last team fight here. PerkZ was annoying for sure, but he didn't actually get to kill anyone in the back line. Hansama stayed safe, so did PowerOfEvil. The entire wave is about to die now. The tower will be fine, it will just randomly drop down, but it's gonna drop fairly low, and if G2 can at some point actually move over and kill it, that's a big advantage.
All right, PerkZ continues to be annoying on the side lane. No flash available to him. In G2 eSports, they're not really pushing past the river. They didn't guide those minion waves in previously. Misfits playing the mid lane pressure game relatively well. It feels like they're making G2 come to them and not G2 the other way around.
I feel like it's simply just a matter of G2, they have to reset. They've invested a lot to get vision control around the Baron, but now they need to pick up their buffs. Now they need to refresh their wards. So they've conceded the vision for now, but they're still in the power play. They've set up a slow push top lane. Spot will start slowly pushing in Misfits' favor, but that's going to take a while. And G2, even though they were pushed back, have regained control over this Baron area.
Oh, every time Misfits get split up, I start to get nervous for them. Their comp is so strong in those 5v5s. And as it stands, we still dance around Baron.
Yeah, and we can just see both teams are playing the style where they don't want to make that big gamble. They don't want to take the 50-50 Baron. They are trying to get an advantage on their side first. So a lot of it comes down to pushing out mid, pushing out top, set up your vision at Baron, recall, buy new control wards, return out on the map, and then when the enemy team has been busy killing your wards, and they need to recall, you're already back on the map, you're placing your new vision, and then you can actually get full control of Baron. But it's a dance that takes a lot of time, and one guy goes to another side of the map, and then suddenly the dance is over.
All right, let's see how this dance continues to play out. IgNar gets chunked down, and just before we get to this next big fight, I really want to talk a little bit about Misfits. You know, showing up, they placed 4th in spring, they're in the finals here in summer. This change in the jungle for Maxlore, this one-year plan we talked about, and at 33 minutes, going toe-to-toe with the undisputed best team in EU. This is a good start to their first final appearance. They haven't faltered under the pressure, and they're still in with the shots.
Oh, 100%. When you play these late game comps, it comes down to you outplaying them in one team fight, and you're suddenly winning the entire game. But another thing I want to highlight with Misfits here that's super impressive in my opinion is the fact that as an organization, they so early invested heavily in this team. Misfits, before Spring Split started, went to a month-long boot camp in Korea to prepare for the Spring Split and find the correct players for this lineup. They've invested in staff. There's a head coach, assistant coach, head analyst, assistant analyst, general manager, sports psychologist, all working with this team. And they're getting rewarded for it.
And what I love is they've made substitutions and roster changes that improved their performance. Kakao subbed out between spring and summer for Maxlore. Big question mark. And during the split, question marks about whether it was the right call. In playoffs, hell yes, it was the right call. Alphari's now once again under pressure. He's got the Nature's Grasp available to him. May need that one. Gonna dodge some damage, but not the feast. That Sap Magic passive buys some time. But Expect can tank the tower for days. The rest of Misfits, now they're being dived on underneath the Baron. Redemption thrown down fairly early. Zven spell shields the Glacial Prison. Still has flash available to him. Baron helping out. The dunk from Trick. Featherstorm comes out from Hansama. G2 now looking for a re-engage as PerkZ and Expect are playing the split push.
G2 are just so good at League of Legends. They have a 3-man squad holding off the Baron while the 2-man unit of PerkZ and Expect take down an inhibitor. These guys are the kings of Europe for a reason, and that demonstration was fantastic.
Using the double TP to send PerkZ down in that lane here. Misfits knew they couldn't actually stay at the Baron because 2 teleports would just come in and it would be a 5 versus 4. So Misfits were stuck in a situation where there was no good answer for them. They had to try and start a Baron, and maybe Alphari could stay alive. As soon as Alphari died, it was lost.
And of course, with Alphari dying, the inhibitor falls. It's 3 dragons for G2. It's nearly 5,000 gold in the lead. And in terms of itemization, they've also hit that 4th item spike earlier. So G2 just go back to this slow, controlled, calculated League of Legends, which is where they truly have shone over the last 2 years. This is G2's dominance in Europe at this time of the game.
And just thinking about both comps a little bit more, I feel like that there is still one way in which Misfits can win a fight. And that is if Alphari can get a successful flank off to get onto the backline. But even then, Zven still has both of his summoner spells. He still has the spell shield. It will not be easy, but the ball delivery system that you have with a flanking Maokai and an Orianna gives you the potential to win a fight. But at this point in the game, it is so much easier for G2 to be able to force and execute, especially when they have the bot inhibitor and the Baron taking potential is so fast with the Cho'Gath.
Got super minions in the bot lane as well at the moment, and it's fun now. None of the teams have actually been hard committing to the Baron. They will fight around it.
Yeah, and they continue to fight around it. IgNar gets bursted down. And Zven not going to throw the hunt yet, but look at how he melts through Maxlore.
I mean, technically this game, it's been one long Baron dance.
Yes.
Where it's constantly just bait around it, never surrender the objective. And then because Misfits only running one teleport and a Maokai, who will lose the side lane against the Cho'Gath already, well, the Misfits can't actually control the map.
It's going to take such a long time for Alphari to deal with those super minions. Maxlore's being bursted down. Redemptions and teleport is used from Misfits. Alphari stuck in the pit. He's got flash available, and Misfits fancy this might be the fight. PerkZ is exhausted on the back end, and the shockwave not going to find PerkZ. Zven continues to take down Alphari as the feast. It secures the kill. Expect gets the second kill of the fight. Now PowerOfEvil's routed and killed. Featherstorm will buy just a few seconds as Summer is destroyed by Zven. Gets himself a killing spree, 11-2. Super's inside the base, and G2 are looking for the first of the series.
G2 is such a good team fighting team, and they demonstrate it once more. They dismantle Misfits in game 1, and they're looking to take the game.
Nexus turrets are falling. Nearly 40 minutes in, G2 arrested control early and did not give it back. The second Nexus turret will be falling, and G2 are one step closer to the trophy, winning game 1.
Misfits in this game never really got a lot of value out of their early picks in the draft. The Xayah, while it was so successful in lane yesterday during Fnatic and H2K, it went even against the Sivir. Zven and Mithy, obviously known for being able to at least go even in their lanes. So Xayah at no point actually stood out. And that was the first rotation from Misfits together with the Orianna. And the same can be said about the Orianna here from PowerOfEvil.
He missed many clutch shockwaves, but also he didn't really land them onto any significant targets. Multiple times they were hitting onto that Cho'Gath.
Yeah.
They weren't game-changing. They weren't swinging them in their favor. And PowerOfEvil, he was one of the big focal points for us in this first game, and so far he hasn't been stepping up.
We just saw Misfits right now go for draft. It was focused on late game team fighting. That's what they aimed for. They couldn't really camp lanes, as we've seen before, especially mid lane with Orianna Sejuani, which is definitely not the greatest like 2v2 combo. So we just got to see G2 kind of control the game from the get-go, it felt like. And then with the double TP, they were just waiting and waiting and waiting until they could go and actually kill the Cho'Gath.
Helped so much for Trick as well. Super early gank in the mid lane, really good pressure in the top lane. You can see Mithy on your screen right now, huge smiles. Can't say the same for Maxlore, Hussein, and the rest of the Misfits support staff. It was a close game. Misfits definitely did not crumble, but it was clear in that game that G2 had their number.
But this is one of those situations where it felt like Misfits were trying to play G2's game, and they ended up falling short. And what they had so much success with during the playoffs was getting an early lead and properly utilizing it, snowballing off the back of it, getting Maxlore on a heavy ganking jungler, getting PowerOfEvil on a champion where he can really snowball and impact more of the map. And we did not really see very much of that in this first game.
I mean, it wasn't the commitment from the plan. They stuck to that late game, as we've mentioned already. And of course, Misfits will have side selection in game 2. Let's see whether or not they feel it was the draft that was the problem. G2 took the first win in the fight for the trophy. Let's check in with the analyst desk for what they thought in game 1.
Thank you very much, QuickShot. Thank you very much, guys. Now, before we get into kind of the analytical nitty-gritty, I just want to take a step back, and you as a player, so as when you come into a best-of-5 versus a team that you're the underdog against, and you can't really do anything, you get kind of choked out of the match. Is that kind of the most difficult way to lose, and how do you mentally reset?
I think it was especially hard for Alphari because he relied so much on his team doing something, and I don't think against the champion that they had, he couldn't do much on his own. So it's just a slow death, sort of. Yeah. So it's really annoying, but it's really good in this scenario if they have like an outsider view, like you're saying, that can help them and see what was the issue during the game, like maybe picks and bans, maybe they did something wrong in the game.
Yeah, that's what it's going to come down to. They need to reset right now. Let's take a look at picks and bans together. You mentioned the Maokai where he couldn't really do anything on his own, but Yamato, you did have some good things to say about especially the Trundle there.
Like, I think Trundle is something that has gone under the radar. I think we've seen it a couple of times against the Cho'Gath, but I was very, very happy that they didn't put it against the Cho'Gath, because if you have a Trundle top lane and LeBlanc is in the game, you're going to just have a bad time. What you need from Trundle in this game is just the ultimate on the Cho'Gath, and in this case, I think the pivot to the Maokai, Against Expect, I feel like Alphari is willing to play a champ that can just scale into it because Expect is not really the player that would punish him. I think Maokai is also a very good pick into LeBlanc if you want to force yourself into those 5-5 teammates around the mid lane.
So the idea was pretty good, I would say, from both sides. Yesterday you talked about Cho'Gath being a trap in a couple of scenarios. Why was it fine here?
I think in this case, like
Maokai.
No, now it's Maokai.
Now it's Maokai, yeah. I think the big difference here is Jarvan as an engage, Cho'Gath can act as a kind of tool to just follow up on things. Also in this case, since LeBlanc is going to be split pushing, Cho'Gath is going to be split pushing, the enemy team is going to be forced to engage. Cho'Gath, when you have an enemy team running into you, you have a much easier time landing your spells.
You do. Maokai is your favorite champion, so we will go ahead and look at the analysis.
No, no, I think Maokai is fine into Cho'Gath, but you just have no pressure, basically. The main issue is, I think, they have weaker jungler, even though it ended up that Misfits had the best jungle in the early game because Jarvan did a level 2 gank mid, and then they had Tell wherever was Jarvan until level 5 or something. So I think early game was pretty even, but I think it came down to like picks and bans in mid game. I just think that Misfits drafts couldn't do much in mid game in my opinion. They couldn't force on them, and as soon as they're in the bad spot, then G2 could just force on them because they had Jarvan, they had Alistar, and they had Cho'Gath. Like there's so many tools to do something, and it's not like Maokai can force on like Sivir or LeBlanc, right? And it's not like Sejuani can force on them either unless he gets a really good flank or a really good ult on LeBlanc that you don't expect. So yeah, I don't think Misfits had much tools to do something mid-game, and I think G2 had a lot.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. This was a replay where Misfits tried to force something because I think they had the feeling, we know we're going to get in trouble if we scale, just wait to scale into late game, so we want to make something happen.
I think the main thing with LeBlanc, and when you're winning the side lane pressure, then the enemy team are going to be put in a position where they have to pretty much force on the mid wave, take the mid wave, and then step into the Nash area, and put themselves in a position where they force Nash. So the enemy team are going to put themselves where they have to just team fight. That is the only kind of win condition that Misfits had in this time around. Orianna, sure, she scales well, but she has to be put in those team fight situations. And of course, G2 is just going to make sure that they avoid them with the TP play and just farming more efficiently on the sides.
Yeah, unfortunately for Misfits Gaming, G2, they get a huge fight just a bit later in the mid lane, brought to you by Acer Predator when it was completely even, but they win this one and they just propel themselves into the mid game.
I think in this case there was a time where they just were not on time to catch this midway. They tried to come in from a weird angle, and of course look at the Sivir just auto-attacking freely. No one touched her ever in these team fights because they just came from a strange angle to contest this midwave.
Yeah, the Sivir we saw yesterday also, Reckless had a great performance on it. It's starting to be bannable, especially in the hands of someone like Zven.
I think like in the actual meta, the team fight depends so much on like whether the carries can hit or not. So in this team fight that we just saw, for example, Hans couldn't hit anyone, and Alistar comboed Orianna, so both carries are not hitting, right? And meanwhile, Trundle ultimated Cho'Gath, but no one can hit him because Hans is not there yet, and Orianna is being comboed by Alistar, right? So G2 just had the upper hand in this team fight, and there's nothing that Misfits could done to like kill the Cho'Gath eventually.
No, and all that they did was kind of hover around Baron because they were constantly afraid that G2 was going to take that Baron. And if we take a look at kind of the other team fights, first one I want to show is where there weren't any kills, but it just shows how G2 is on the same page. That PerkZ power play with the TP behind them, and that's what he's been doing all playoffs.
I think this is another case where Misfits are trying to take the shortcut to go through their own jungle instead of just walking through mid, force the enemy to show up on the wave, and then walk as a group towards the Nasher. Of course, I agree that they have very little tools to win this game, but the only way for them to gain any pressure at all is to get the mid wave, walk S5 towards Baron, and try to force it.
Yeah, it didn't work out for them. Here's the play then later on where they will kill Alphari in the top lane. They will divide their attention, and then they will have two lanes pushing, and in the end, be able to get the power play over Baron. So it was kind of textbook play from G2 from that point on.
I think G2 did a bit the same as we do usually. It's like when the game is like in a really stale position where both teams are not really doing much. You just look at on the side lane, right? Because it's not like G2 can just run at them because they have Trundle pillar unless they get really good flank by Jarvan on Orianna, but even though he has flash, right? So maybe they can kill the Jarvan as they engage, and he's too far from his team. So yeah, it depends how the game is, and right now they probably felt like they couldn't do much, so they just look on the Maokai. They probably didn't see LeBlanc, and the miss was probably say too late, so maybe they could have tried to force bound earlier, like get deeper vision, a lot of small things.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with your sentiment that I think with their team composition, the LeBlanc with the TP on bottom is just going to be a ticking time bomb. They're going to try to pressure on bottom. They can't just force Nash straight up. Marcus is going to ult and they're going to just run in, of course. So their play is to slowly take the bottom inhib, make sure that the enemy team can't do Nasher. And in this kind of situation, they have to just make sure to understand that they're on a ticking time. They need to just run it down mid pretty much and just force that Nasher, because they can't tank it for a long time. They need to force that 5v5.
So TLDR, when you look at the next game for Misfits, that they now need to shake it off, do they just need to make sure they have more power in the mid game? Is it as simple?
I think they could have eventually do something in this game, but it's really like you don't see that when you're playing. Like, for example, you're just controlling vision, right? Like, maybe in this game, Sejuani needed to go for flanks instead of looking to just go past 4. So they need someone to do something, right? It's not like Trundle Pillar just gonna force a fight. Eventually they will just run away. So what their tools are is Maokai and Sejuani, but Maokai is really often a side lane. So unless he TPs behind them and have really good flank, they're not gonna fight a team fight. So Sejuani had to do something in this case, and they are just like seeing each other every time, so they couldn't do much.
No, it was a really tough game for Misfits Gaming in the first one in this best of 5, when the Kings of Europe are looking to reign supreme yet again here in the finals. Meet us back here for game 2 right after this.
It is game